Psychedelic-assisted therapy is a future of mental health treatment. The science is just undeniable. But while it is inevitable that psychedelic-assisted therapy will be the future of mental health treatment, it is equally vitally important to point out that Compass Pathways, a leader in psychedelic-assisted therapy, is not doing it sustainably. And, if left unchecked, Compass Pathways could easily collapse the entire psychedelic-assisted therapy before it's even had its chance to shine. But there may be something that you and I can do to help secure the future of psychedelic-assisted therapy. Alright, so how does psychedelic-assisted therapy work? This seems like a good topic to get out of the way before diving into the expose from a leading company. Psychedelics like LSD, MDMA, and psilocybin act as an agonist for the 5-HT2A serotonin receptor. In layman's terms, they bind to the receptors that tell our brains that we feel happy and satisfied. This feel-good property of psychedelics is why some of them, especially MDMA, are heavily used in party scenes. But this isn't what makes them therapeutic. It's a side effect of the serotonin receptors that make psychedelic-assisted therapy an endeavor of healing. When we're under the effects of psychedelics, our default mode network goes offline. The default mode network is a neural system that connects to our prefrontal cortex and posterior cortex, to our past memories and experiences, which is what creates our sense of identity. When the default mode gets shut down, our sense of self follows suit. This is part of what's known among psychonauts as ego death. We feel like we're no longer ourselves because the part of the brain that creates our conception of ourself ceases to function. Once ego death occurs, the different networks of our brain who don't normally communicate with one another start communicating with one another. This is a leading theory as to how psychedelics causes us to hallucinate and experience things that aren't actually there. Since networks of the brain are now interfacing with one another when normally they will be kept in different silos, psychedelic use has the added benefit of letting us form new neural connections and as a result, break toxic habits. That is why psychedelics are so effective at healing our minds. By removing our sense of self, they're also able to remove all of the negative perceptions we hold about ourselves, allowing new, positive mental habits to form in its place. So, now that we've gotten the therapeutic effects of psychedelics out of the way, what is Compass Pathways? Compass Pathways was founded by millionaires Lars Wilde, George Goldsmith, and Ekaterina Malevska, and is a current market leader in the development of psychedelic-assisted therapy. More specifically, Compass Pathway focuses on psilocybin treatment as opposed to other treatments like LSD, MDMA, and DMT. Psilocybin, for anyone who might not know, is a psychedelic compound found in magic mushrooms. It's the bit of the mushrooms that gives its mind-altering effects. A mushroom without psilocybin is just another typical ordinary clump of fungi. What sets Compass Pathways apart from their competitors, their competitive edge for the business-minded viewers, is that they're the first company to obtain legal rights to provide psilocybin in the corporate world. This is referred to as the first mover advantage, sometimes referred to as FMA for short. This is a huge deal for several reasons, one of which being that it gives the company a short time frame where they have a virtual monopoly on an entire industry before competitors start flocking in to absorb some of the market share. The primary reason why Compass Pathways was able to have such an explosive start was because of early investments of $12 million from the co-founder of Palantir, Peter Thiel, and $25 million from former Wall Street executive Mike Novogratz. Both of these men made their investments through ATAI Life Sciences, a German biotechnology startup. I'll get back to Peter Thiel and Mike Novogratz later. For now, I want to focus on the early days of Compass Pathways when they had their virtual monopoly on the entire industry. So, if psychedelic-assisted therapy is so vital, and if Compass Pathways has established such a strong moat, then why shouldn't we support them? The problem starts at the very top. Literally. At the very, very tippy top of the company. The board of directors. Warren Buffett, the most successful investor in history, has been quoted saying that one of the most important indicators to the well-being of a company is the board of directors and the C-suite. The C-suite, for those who do not know, are a company's most important executives. They're the chief officers. The chief executive officer, the chief operating officer, the chief financial officer, etc., etc. In most corporations, the entire C-suite reports to the chief executive officer, the CEO, who in turn reports to the board of directors. So, who's on the board of directors of Compass Pathways? The board is made up of these 9 individuals. Of these 9 directors, a whopping grand total of 0 of them have any professional experience in the mental health field. They are instead made up of people from SaaS, biotech, life sciences, and pharmaceuticals. The absolute closest to any sort of experience in mental health were the married co-founders, George Goldsmith and Dr. Malifska, whose son was diagnosed with severe depression and OCD while in college. That's literally it. Just, I have family with mental illness. In fairness though, Lars Wilde, the third co-founder, did suffer from anxiety and treatment-resistant depression. But having personally suffered from a mental illness doesn't make you qualified to run a mental health treatment company any more than having a driver's license makes you qualified to repair an engine. And if you search through the leadership below the board of directors, you'll be able to find a small smattering of smaller leaders with some degree of experience with mental health. But the people at the top, the ones calling all of the large shots, nothing. Nada. All of this points to the idea that Compass Pathway seems to care more about being a pharmaceutical company than actually helping heal the common person's mental health. There are still 2 more people we have to talk about. The 2 early investors, Mike Novogratz and Peter Thiel. Not much is known about Mike Novogratz compared to Peter Thiel, other than the fact that he's a former partner at Goldman Sachs and Fortress Investment Groups. Both are massive hedge funds. He was one of the many hedge fund managers who lost his fortune in the 07-08 financial crisis. But before you start feeling too bad for him and his empty bank account, he managed to swiftly climb his net worth back up to $3 billion US, thanks in large part to early investments in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Today, he's a CEO and chairman of the crypto-focused investment firm Galaxy Digital, where he often gets called on to provide his opinion on the future of blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Compared to Mike Novogratz, Peter Thiel is an absolute riot. The dude always seems to be in the spotlight for the most random controversies, such as the Immortality Project, where he would get specific blood transfusions with the intent of extending his life expectancy. And who could ever forget the time he wrote on the subject of date rape drugs? It is ludicrous to believe anyone who had been forcefully violated would not know it and bear physical marks. As in, sexual violence doesn't count if the victim was drugged and doesn't remember it afterwards. Can you imagine if we treated all crimes like this?
Objection!
Obviously, it's important for all industries to be ethical, but it's doubly important for companies involved in psychedelic-assisted therapy because we have a long and bloody history of greed towards psychedelics destroying lives and communities. This isn't conjecture, it isn't what-ifism. We know that when opportunists start viewing psilocybin as an instrument of self-gratification, as opposed to a vehicle of healing and transformation, it destroys everything around them because we've gone through this before. It's such an important cautionary tale, yet so few people know about this side of the history of psilocybin treatment, which is why I've already made a whole separate video going into the topic at length. Link in the description. If you, understandably, don't want to watch a 22-minute long video on the topic, then I'll just quickly summarize what happened so you can have the bare bones understanding. In the 16th century, the Spaniards conquered the Aztec Empire, torturing and killing their ways to the eradication of the Mazatec cultural history, including their use of hallucinogenic mushrooms in religious rituals. The few remaining Mazatec people were forced to take their practices underground for the next 500 years. Fast forward to the 20th century, we just finished 2 world wars, and were looking to take advantage of our traumatized post-war society. Banks started investing massive sums of capital into alternative mental health treatments. At the same time, a multi-millionaire Wall Street investment banker named R. Gordon Wasson learns that some cultures use mushrooms to heal their mental state. Wasson spends years wandering around Mexico looking for someone to introduce him to the Mazatec mushroom healing ceremonies before meeting Maria Sabina, an elderly village healer. Wasson convinces Sabina to let him participate in a mushroom ceremony with a lie about a lost child. Wasson and his photographer tripped their balls off after taking a dozen of Maria Sabina's mushrooms. He would later write about the experience in a popular magazine and publish photographs accompanying the story. One of those photographs had a caption alluding to the mushroom's use in communicating with the divine. The article went absolutely viral in the United States, creating a massive tourism boom to this remote village in Mexico. The sudden influx of tourists completely destroys the tiny community. Crime skyrockets, houses get burned down, people are murdered. Decades later, an exiled Maria Sabina tells reporters that her greatest regret in life was exposing the mushrooms to the outside world. R. Gordon Wasson writes a scathing op-ed in the New York Times condemning the actions of what he calls lowlives and hippies for their role in destroying a once idyllic community. The Mazatec significance of the mushrooms was destroyed with the village. Natives in the region would tell reporters that the mushrooms have completely lost its cultural significance. Anyway, back to Compass Pathways. Something the company has been receiving a lot of negative attention for is their liberal use of patents. There's a lot of miscommunication going around about these patents, such as Vince S., the author of an article on harrisbreakin.com, who doesn't appear to know the difference between granted patents and patent applications. So I'm gonna clear up some misconceptions first. Compass Pathways has already been granted 2 patents for the creation of psilocybin solutions. These 2 patents are 10,947,257 and 10,954,259. These are both 100% legal and completely ethical. There's nothing sus going around with these 2 patents. The problem is with patent application WO 2020/212952. Patent applications are identified by the letters WO followed by the year of the application and then a 6-digit serial. So this patent application was from the year 2020 and is referred to by 212952. 212952 is not ethical and is hella unbased. Among other things, 212952 is claiming that Compass Pathways was the first company where the patient receiving the psilocybin therapy treatment is suffering from depression or some form of dysphoria, who takes psilocybin orally in a room made up of a bed or couch decorated with muted colors while playing good sounding music. All of these are already basic components of psilocybin use, which makes them not patentable. Sort of. The problem is that Compass Pathways is legitimately the first company to legally use psilocybin in an environment where the participant is laying on a couch listening to music while staring at pretty colors. The instances in which normal people took psychedelics in a similar environment were all technically illegal. So since the patent office only looks at scientific literature and previous patents to determine whether an idea is original enough to be deserving of a patent, Compass Pathways does technically have some form of a claim towards their patent. Whether the patent is granted is still unknown, but the results of the patent application don't change the fact that Compass Pathways is trying to claim ownership over a practice thousands of years old. I already briefly touched on how greed towards psilocybin has a history of destroying the communities and ruining the people around them, but this also has very real implications on the other companies hoping to enter the psychedelic-assisted therapy space. Because one of the practices Compass Pathways is trying to patent is, and I quote, "The therapist provides reassuring contact and responds to the subject if the subject initiates conversation," which is literally already the entirety of psychedelic-assisted therapy. There can be no other competitors to Compass Pathways if they're preventing non-Compass Pathway therapists to practice the art of providing therapy. This would be akin to Ford Motors patenting the idea of a vehicle on 4 wheels to prevent General Motors from building cars. From what I can gather, and I'm not a lawyer, There aren't any laws explicitly prohibiting the act of patenting the act of providing a service. But there is something similar in copyright law. Sans affaire is French for "seem to be made." It's a copyright law stating that no entity can claim ownership of a popular trope that the consumer of the media readily expects from the genre. For example, no production company can copyright the use of space lasers in a sci-fi movie. No publishing house can copyright the use of hidden gadgets and femme fatales in a spy novel. And no fantasy writer can copyright the concept of dwarves, elves, and dragons. So just like how it's expected that a fantasy story will have non-human races, a spy novel will have cool gadgets and sexy, deadly women, and a sci-fi movie will have space lasers, it's going to be expected that a psychedelic-assisted therapy session will have the exact same properties that Compass Pathways is trying to patent. Music, nice colors, soft furniture, a trained professional guiding the process. Even the patent claim of oral ingestion of psilocybin is ridiculous, because how else would psilocybin be ingested if not orally? Nobody has ever boofed a mushroom. So what we have here is an overzealous company led by people without the proper background, backed by controversial figures, trying to create a monopoly in an emerging mental health treatment space. A space that already has a bloody history of murder and exploitation. We have to stop Compass Pathways. Look, I'm not naive. I know that a company has to make money for its shareholders. I know that no amount of effective treatment will matter if the company supplying the treatment goes bankrupt. Remember how I said earlier that the board of directors is at the tippy top of the company? That's not technically accurate. I mean, it is true, but there's a slight catch to it. Yes, the board of directors of Compass Pathways, the small group of 9 scientists and financiers, do control the CEO's activities, and through the CEO, the C-suite, and through the C-suite, the rest of the company. But technically speaking, there's another group of individuals with the authority to control the board of directors. And that's us, the shareholders of the company, the collective group who owns a company together. If the holders of 51% of the company's outstanding shares, that's the number of stock shares the company's been split up into, decide that the company should be run in an ethical manner, that monopolies aren't the way to run a business, that the actual well-being of the patients should be prioritized over quick financial return, then the company will be forced to change for the better. Because right now, all the facts about this company, the lack of professional mental health experience in the board, the dubious major investors, the overzealous patents, etc., is pointing to the idea that Compass Pathways is more interested in being just another pharmaceutical company than they are in caring for mental health. Hey y'all! This video took several months to complete, from the initial research for the first draft to the final editing touches. In that period of time, Compass Pathways added a 10th member to the board, Wayne J. Riley, the only PLC on the board, who himself was a former board member of Vertex Pharmaceuticals. I just felt it was imperative to drop an update on the board of directors situation. But since we're already here, I might as well talk about a couple of the other directors in more detail. You remember Peter Thiel, the vampire wannabe who supports date rape? His multi-million-dollar investment into the company secured Jason Kam a spot on Compass Pathways' board of directors. As stated earlier, that massive investment was put through ATAI Life Sciences, the co-founder and CEO of which, Florian Brand, managed to secure himself a spot onto Compass Pathways' board of directors. At the end of the day, do we really want to trust our mental health with a company who lets 20% of its directors buy their way into positions of power? Because I personally do not.